I'm Isabel Huxley, 34 years old, and today was the day my family thought they had finally confirmed I was a failure. They didn't say it outright. My family never does. They show it in the empty chairs they leave for you outside the house. In the names they print on banners that don't include yours. In the silence that rings louder than applause. The invitation to the family event came in a one-line text from my mother. Come for the party, don't dress weird. Not, we miss you. Not, glad to hear from you after 6 years. Just an order. As if I were still 17, still living under her roof, still expected to fall in line like one of her polished dining forks. The event was for my younger sister, Mallory. Lieutenant Mallory Huxley, according to the program booklet placed proudly at every seat except mine. She'd just been recognized as one of the top graduates from her military leadership course. A rising star. The golden child. The one who stayed, who made them proud. I stood at the edge of the dining room, wearing a plain gray button-up and dark jeans. No medals. No rank. No noise. I was neutral intentionally. And yet, I stood out like a cracked tile in a flawless floor. No one looked up when I entered. Not even Mallory. My father mumbled, "What are you doing these days?" Without interest, and didn't wait for my answer. He turned to toast Mallory before I could form a syllable. My Aunt Karen took one look at me and chuckled, raising her wine glass. "Didn't you used to pretend to be a waitress? Guess some dreams really stick, huh?" I smiled tightly. I'm better at performing now. The words hit quietly, not loud enough to argue, but sharp enough to bruise. They didn't know how true that was. When it came time for the toasts, I was asked without irony to get more water and extra forks. Like a caterer who'd wandered too far into the dining room. No one offered to help, no one asked if I minded. It was just assumed. She's the extra. She can handle it. I didn't argue. I'd learned not to. I went to the kitchen, refilled pitchers, stacked utensils, all while remembering the last time I'd stood in that house 10 years ago, shattered and half alive. I returned to find all the seats taken. Every single one labeled with neat calligraphy. Except for mine. Mom blinked at me like she'd forgotten I was even there. "Oh, you can sit out on the porch. There's a folding chair by the grill." So I did. The air was cooler out there, biting. The folding chair creaked under me as I watched the celebration unfold through the window, my sister laughing, my father bragging, my aunt gossiping. Not once did anyone say my name. But beneath the coat I wore stitched into the inner pocket were 5 silver stars embroidered on a hidden patch. No one in that house knew what they meant. And I wasn't about to explain. Because before this day was over, someone else would do it for me. From the side yard, I felt my phone vibrate. Not a regular phone, a secure military-grade receiver, barely the size of a pen. I glanced at the tiny screen. The message blinked once. Report, Fort Irwin. Observer assignment. Intel command. My lips curled. They thought I was nobody. They didn't know the missions. The years. The silence. The shadows I walked through. And they definitely didn't know that I outranked every single person in that room, including the one they were raising their glasses for. But that wasn't the story I came to tell. Not yet. The real story, the one that could change everything, started a long time ago, with a decision no one in my family ever cared enough to ask about. Not until the day Mallory's drill sergeant saw me. Paused in front of an entire platoon. And whispered the words that split the world wide open. "General Huxley, ma'am." The silence that followed could cut through steel. And for the first time ever, Mallory looked at me, not like I was a mistake, but like I was a stranger she'd never bothered to understand. They thought I walked away because I couldn't handle the pressure. But the truth? I didn't walk away. I disappeared on purpose. And the reason why is darker than anyone in that house would believe. Do you think someone can carry power in silence for years and still be called a failure by their own family? They think I left because I was weak. Because I couldn't handle the shouting, the drills, the pressure. They say I quit the Reserve Officer Corps after 6 weeks because I lacked the grit. But they never asked what really happened. No one ever does. Growing up in Spokane, I was the quiet one not because I had nothing to say, but because I learned early on that in our house, silence was safer than truth. My sister, Mallory, was everything my parents loved in one package: obedient, competitive, driven. She color-coded her notebooks at 10, made captain of her varsity soccer team at 15, and enlisted with honors at 17. Meanwhile, I was the one who doodled on walls, lost in books about encryption, global history, and military strategy. I didn't want to march in a straight line. I wanted to understand why lines were drawn in the first place. But my curiosity was never celebrated. It was corrected. When I got into West Point's Shadow Intelligence track, it wasn't through the usual path. I applied under a selective independent clearance route, not for glory, but for a deeper purpose. My goal was to serve quietly, to learn how information shaped wars more than bullets. But then came the breakdown. I was 22, a cadet. And one night, after 48 hours without sleep, a failed simulation, and a call home that ended with, "Maybe you're just not built for this," something in me snapped. I stood outside the barracks for 2 hours in the rain, holding my ID card in one hand and a letter of withdrawal in the other. By dawn, I was gone. Not discharged. Scrubbed. My name was wiped from official West Point cadet logs under a shadow contract clause, a special program designed for high-clearance disappearances. I didn't even know it existed until the recruiter slid the file across the metal table and said, "You want purpose? This is where silence earns stars." That was the day I stopped being Isabel Huxley. I became someone else. Someone who only existed on encrypted rosters. Someone who didn't go home for holidays. Someone who didn't even send letters. Because letters could be traced. And I couldn't afford mistakes. Meanwhile, back home, they crafted their own story. That I dropped out. That I couldn't make the cut. That I was too emotional, too soft, too unstable. The worst part? I let them believe it. Because correcting them meant giving away secrets that weren't mine to tell. I remember one Christmas, 6 years ago, when I showed up unannounced. Mallory opened the door, stunned. I handed her a plain green duffel bag. "Gym gear," I said. "Figured you could use it." She nodded stiffly. "Didn't think you'd come." I shrugged. "Didn't think you'd want me to." We didn't hug. She never opened the bag. Inside that duffel was an encrypted military device I'd used in South Sudan, packed between a thermal layer and a rolled-up hoodie. At the time, I didn't know why I included it. Maybe part of me wanted her to discover who I really was. But she didn't. Or maybe she wasn't ready. The further I got from Spokane, the more my past blurred into a file. Names changed. Faces forgotten. Missions buried. But you can only erase so much before something tries to resurface. 10 years into silent service, I started having dreams again, not of battles, but of family dinners. Long tables. Mallory laughing. My dad calling for a toast. My seat always empty. And then came the message from Strategic Intel Command. Observer request, Fort Irwin. Training cycle Bravo. My eyes narrowed when I read the attached roster. Mallory Huxley. Cadet instructor. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a crossroads. Part of me wanted to decline. Stay hidden. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe unfinished business, said, "Go." At the airport, I sat in a far corner of the gate lounge, watching the parade of uniforms and civilians. Everyone trying to go somewhere important. Everyone wearing their name on their chest like a badge of honor. I didn't wear mine. I hadn't in years. But tucked inside the lining of my coat was a patch with 5 silver stars, a silent reminder that sometimes the highest ranks are earned in places no one sees. I arrived at Fort Irwin just before sunrise. Dust swirled like whispers across the desert floor. The morning drills had begun, sharp calls, boot slaps, the familiar echo of command. I stayed on the guest platform behind 2 civilian contractors. No one knew me. No one looked twice. Until someone did. Drill Sergeant Bruckner. The man whose voice could rattle tanks. The one they said once made a colonel cry during field inspection. His eyes swept the rows. Then, they locked on me. He paused. Froze. And with surgical precision, he marched right up to the bleachers, stopped 2 feet away, and snapped to attention. General Huxley, ma'am. I wasn't told you'd be present. Mallory, standing mid-formation, dropped her training rifle. And the silence that followed? It was the sound of everything changing. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. But the truth? I wasn't haunting her. I was about to become the only one who could save her. After the salute, no one moved. Not the cadets. Not the officers. And definitely not Mallory, who stood frozen, her face stuck between disbelief and denial. Bruckner didn't explain himself. He didn't need to. He snapped back into formation, barked a few commands, and the drills resumed, but the air was charged now, like a thunderstorm hovering above parade boots and steel discipline. I left the field quietly, exiting through the side gate just as the first whispers began to ripple through the ranks. By noon, Fort Irwin wasn't buzzing, it was humming with rumors. Who is she? Did you see Bruckner salute her? That's Mallory's sister, right? Wait, General? I didn't care for gossip. But I did care about control. And control, I was quickly losing. That evening, I was tucked away in a nondescript guest suite, with no windows, no television, and a military-issued cot. The room smelled like dust and restraint. At 3:47 a.m., my secure line buzzed. Not the usual encrypted pings from command, no, this was something else. A flashing red alert. Level 4 breach. Unauthorized access detected. Origin. Internal node. Profile tag, Huxley Alpha. My old digital ID, one that should have been buried 6 years ago, had just been triggered. I sat up fast. Heart pounding. That tag was tied to files I'd buried deep beneath firewalls and secondary protocols, including Alderson React, a dormant Black Ops initiative I'd helped engineer back when I was still crawling through wires and feeding misinformation to ghost units across borders. There was only one possibility. Someone had accessed my old device. And the only person who'd even touched that device in years was Mallory. I wanted to believe it was an accident. But even accidents have consequences. By noon, I was in the Strategic Coordination Office with Major Cecilia Penn, a woman so sharp she could cut glass with her tone alone. She didn't offer coffee. She offered suspicion. We've logged an irregular access event, she said. Clearance breach tied to your former identity. Explain. I didn't trigger it, I replied calmly. But I know who did. And it wasn't intentional. Intentions don't stop internal investigations. No, I said. But outcomes do. Give me access to the trace logs, I'll find your breach. She paused, studied me for a beat, then handed me a temporary admin token. 36 hours. That's what I had to trace the breach before the file was escalated to Joint Command. I locked myself in the digital forensics lab, breathing in recycled air and blue light. Sergeant Bruckner joined me, arms crossed, silent, loyal in the way most people forget how to be. I dug through logs. Decoded metadata. Pinged ghost servers. And there it was. The device that had triggered the alert was the very one I'd tucked in Mallory's gym duffel 6 years ago. She had no idea what she'd stumbled into. She didn't mean to trip the system. But it didn't matter. Exposure was exposure. I didn't report her. Instead, I sent a message to Bruckner. She touched a ghost file. I need containment, not punishment. But something's off. This wasn't random. Someone wanted this breach to happen. Bruckner didn't reply in words. He just nodded once that was enough. That night, I called Mallory into the lab. She walked in stiff, unsure, eyes flicking between me and the encrypted displays glowing behind my back. You accessed something dangerous, I said. She blinked. I didn't know. I found the drive in the bag you gave me. It said restricted. I was curious. I nodded. Curiosity is how people get erased. She swallowed hard. You're not in trouble yet. But if you don't help me clean this up, this doesn't just end with you losing your position. It ends with me losing everything." For a long beat, she said nothing. Then, in a voice smaller than I remembered, she asked, "Is it true? You're really a general?" I met her gaze. Not on paper. Not officially. But in the shadows where decisions are made? Yes. She sank into a chair like the gravity had just hit her. "Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was heavier than anything either of us was trained to carry. Because silence, I finally said, is the only shield I ever had that actually worked. From that moment, we became a team. Not out of trust. Out of necessity. Bruckner, the unwavering wall. Mallory, the spark that tripped the minefield. And me, the one trying to find where the wires led. We traced the breach through layers of code, following digital breadcrumbs like blood trails across concrete, and then we hit it. The server that had relayed the corrupted alert had been infected 5 years ago by a worm so quiet, so deeply embedded, it was nearly impossible to detect. But I recognized the signature encryption. It came from someone I once tried to bury in a report. Nathan Croft, a former operations officer, with a file so redacted it looked like blackout poetry. He was reassigned after a botched mission in Eastern Europe. But before he vanished, he left behind traps. Code mines. Buried landmines in military systems. Mallory didn't trigger a file. She stepped on one. "Someone planted this," I whispered. "And they used Mallory to make it look like I walked right into it." Bruckner muttered. "You think he's still out there?" I looked up from the console, the screen glowing like a fuse behind me. "I don't think," I said. "I know. They didn't just want to bring me down. They wanted to make me look like the traitor. And if we didn't act fast, they'd succeed." The next 12 hours felt like walking through a minefield with a lit match. Croft wasn't just trying to frame me, he was trying to erase me, permanently, from every chain of command, from every operation I'd ever touched. And if he succeeded, it wouldn't just be my name that went down. It would be the names of good men and women who still lived in silence. People who followed orders in the dark to keep others safe in the light. Mallory stayed quiet most of the morning. She sat across from me in the lab, eyes shadowed, fingers clenched. Not angry anymore. Not defensive. Just absorbing. Bruckner came in with a printed list of civilian contractor entries near Fort Irwin. One name stood out like a loaded gun in a church pew. Nathan Croft registered under an alias, listed as a consultant for a private tactical AI program just outside base perimeter. My heart thudded. "He's close," I said. Mallory's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Bruckner looked at her, cold but steady. "You want redemption? You want to prove you're more than just someone who stumbled into clearance?" She bristled. "Then tell me this," he continued, voice like gravel. "Do you want your record cleaned or do you want to do what's right?" No rebuttal. Just a small nod. Within the hour, we raided Croft's makeshift command node, a civilian housing unit disguised as a tech hub. There were no guards. No traps. Just Croft, sitting among blinking servers, as if he'd been waiting for us. When they cuffed him, he turned to me with a smirk that could poison a well. "You still think conscience is enough to survive in this world?" He leaned in. "You should have stayed in the shadows, General." I stepped closer. Forgotten people don't trigger kill switches. His smirk faded. Back at Fort Irwin, a military tribunal was convened. Fast. Private. High level. The room was colder than steel. Dark wood walls. No flags. No fanfare. Just truth, or whatever version of it they were prepared to accept. Croft started with rehearsed venom. He read from a faded mission report from Operation Candor, an old classified op we ran together. He claimed I'd authorized a civilian purge, that I'd covered up the casualties to preserve my spotless record. The colonel turned to me. "Major Huxley, your response?" I didn't flinch. I simply slid forward a laminated scan of Croft's signed order. His signature. His timestamp. His directive, not mine. Then I spoke. Calm. Clear. Irrefutable. He wrote the purge order. He cut the comms. He made sure no one else could contradict the chain of command. There was a pause, brief, but sharp, like a knife through rope. Then Bruckner stepped forward. Permission to submit a recording. The colonel nodded. And through the speakers came my voice, 5 years younger but steel-hardened. Hold fire. There are heat signatures. Could be civilians. Confirm with recon before proceeding. The silence that followed was heavy. Not just serious, reverent. But the moment that truly broke through? It came from Mallory. She stood, holding a printed log access records showing Croft had illegally entered restricted military codebases 2 years ago, planting the Trojan that caused this entire breach. She spoke loud. Steady, proud. He didn't want sabotage, he wanted revenge. And he used me to get to her. The colonel stared at us both. Major Huxley, he asked, why didn't you report your act of restraint during candor? You could have been decorated. Promoted. I looked ahead, voice steady. Because honor isn't what you say about yourself. It's what you're willing to protect even if it means no one ever knows. The vote was unanimous. All charges dismissed. Clearance restored. Rank reaffirmed. But then came something unexpected. Major Penn approached, holding a formal invitation. We'd like you to deliver the keynote address at the Strategic Defense Cyber Summit next week. I blinked. You want me? On a stage? General Reynolds, once my fiercest critic, stepped forward. Not just on a stage. As the face of integrity. A new model of leadership. I held the envelope. It felt heavier than paper. Heavier than command. And I asked one question. If I accept, will my team's names be exposed? They paused. Penn nodded slowly. There's risk. Encryption only goes so far. I didn't even think twice. Then I declined. I handed the envelope back. I won't burn others just to light my own name. The summit still happened. I stood in front of 300 officers, analysts, and scholars. No slides. No medals. Just one line on the projector behind me. Courage in the shadows. Leading where no one claps. I spoke not of war zones, but of choices. I never failed, I said. I just chose to fight in places where success isn't loud. And in the front row, Mallory sat in formal cadet blues, a binder in her lap, her hand scribbling ideas for new cybersecurity training models. She didn't smile. But she nodded. At the end of the summit, she approached. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small silver pin, handcrafted, unofficial, a quiet symbol passed between leaders who chose people over glory. She pinned it on my lapel, her voice soft. Instead of carving your name in stone, maybe we carve it into memory. 3 days later, I got a call from the Pentagon. They wanted the real story. National recognition. My name in the archives. But I had one final question to ask myself. Does a legacy need a spotlight, or just the truth? 3 days after the summit, I stood in a quiet, high-security wing of the Pentagon. No press. No cameras. Just a manila folder with my name on it and 2 senior officials sitting across the table. General Huxley, one of them a Joint Chiefs liaison, began. We want to make this official. The truth about Operation Candor. About your role. Full recognition, honors, press coverage. Major Penn sat beside him, silent, watching. I asked one question. Just one. If I agree, will the names of my former unit be exposed? There was a pause. A breath. Then the liaison said, there's always risk. Full transparency means full detail. Encryption has limits. I thought of Stanton, my field partner during Candor. He'd saved 6 civilians that night after disobeying a direct order. He now lived quietly in Ohio, under a different name. Married. 2 kids. They didn't even know his past. I nodded. Then slid a sealed letter across the table instead of accepting their offer. If the next generation needs a story, give them this, I said. But leave my name out of it. They opened the envelope. Inside was my written account of the truth, everything that mattered stripped of titles, of decorations, of ego. At the bottom, it read, "When recognition requires a spotlight, maybe we've forgotten why we chose the shadows in the first place." Later that week, I flew back to Spokane. No ceremony. No uniform. No welcome party. Just a quiet tarmac and a rumbling C-130 waiting for deployment. And Mallory. She met me beside the aircraft, hair pulled back, uniform neat, no makeup. She held a small cloth-wrapped box in her hands. "I don't know what to say," she said. "You don't have to." She handed me the box. I opened it carefully. Inside was a silver Phoenix insignia, my old command symbol from the Phoenix Directive Unit, fully restored. She looked down. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "I want to live up to it." I held it in my palm, the weight familiar, like the past whispering that it still remembered me. Then, without a word, she saluted me. For the first time ever. I didn't salute back. I embraced her. No tears, no speeches. Just wind and the hum of jet engines, loud enough to drown out all the years we never spoke. Before boarding, I gave her a small letter. "Open it," I said, "only if you forget who you are." She nodded, slipping it into her breast pocket like it was armor. On the flight, I pulled out an old photo, a blurry shot of our unit in snow gear, standing in a line during winter operations. No faces visible, no names. Just one sentence on the back, written in black marker. "Honor doesn't come from being seen. It comes from keeping your promise even when no one remembers you made it." Back in Spokane, word had started to circulate. Not officially. Just whispers. Aunt Karen called once, left a voicemail. "We had no idea. If you'd just told us, well, things might have been different." My mother sent a card. Plain. No apology. Just the words. "If you want to come for Christmas, let us know. Bring your title if you want." I didn't reply. Because I didn't need an invitation anymore. Not from people who only value what they can brag about. 1 week later, I visited my old high school. Not for nostalgia. For impact. Mallory had connected me to the ROTC cadets there, a small group, eager but disillusioned. I didn't wear medals. I didn't talk about rank. I told them this. Don't chase applause. Chase clarity. Because someday, when no one's watching, you'll have to decide what kind of person you are, and you better already know. They didn't clap. But one of them, a girl with a buzz cut and shaky hands, came up after and whispered, "Thank you for not making it sound like a movie." I smiled. That was the highest honor I'd received in years. That night, Mallory messaged me. "I gave up on you. But you never gave up on me. You just let me grow into it." She attached a picture, her proposal to redesign cybersecurity training based on the breach she caused. It had been approved. And she added, "I'm not trying to be like you anymore. I'm just trying to be someone you'd trust on the field." I stared at the screen, heart still. Then typed back, "You already are." I never went back to my childhood home. Not because I hated it, but because some places just don't change. And I no longer needed them to. Now, when people ask who I am, I don't give them a rank. I give them a story. One about two sisters. One lost. One celebrated. Both trying to find their way back to something real. You don't need medals to matter. You just need to know who you are. When no one else does. And you? Have you ever been judged too soon only to prove them wrong quietly, without needing applause? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes, the most powerful victories are the ones no one sees.